Gracious, loving Father in heaven, we have seen Jesus today. Oh, yes. And our hearts have been touched. And we want, dear Lord, the Spirit of prophecy tells us that what we need is to be converted, to be born again, according to what Jesus told Nicodemus. And Isaiah saw that he wasn't ready for heaven. Nicodemus saw that heaven was a place, too good a place for the condition in which he was in, and he saw that he would not be there, for Jesus told him so. And so, dear Lord, we want to be ready. And the invitation that Jesus gave to those men in John 6 was he was inviting them to be part of the kingdom. And so tonight, as Brother Pippenger is about to present, I believe this is the last meeting of the day, that your Spirit would be poured out on dear Brother Pippenger and these dear souls that are here and myself. That it might not be said of us that we no longer walked with him, but they will receive his gracious invitation when he said, "He who cometh to me, I will in no wise cast out." So now bless us, Lord. Thank you for being with us all this week long. And please pour out your latter rain in Jesus' wonderful, wonderful name. Amen.
I'm on page 9 of the notes. This is the first few quotes are just review of things I've already put in place, so we'll walk through them very quickly. The binding off, the number 4. The quote from Early Writings 1:19 says, "I then saw the third angel, said my accompanying angel, fearful is his work, awful is his mission. He is the angel that is to select the wheat from the tares and seal or bind the wheat for the heavenly garner." It's this work of binding that I'm using for the title of these notes here, and that I'm placing in this period of time where this is the third angel, okay? We have understood correctly for quite some time that the three angels' messages is a 3-step testing process, but there is a difference between the first and second angel's message, and that difference that we mainly emphasize is that during the first test and the second test, probationary time is open, but the third test is the litmus test. There is no probationary time. This is simply where the virgins manifest the character that they have developed in their prior hours of probationary testing time that for you and I begin at 9/11. So we have 3 tests in this history, and we've come to understand that this third test is the period where we are bound either as wheat for the heavenly garner, or she says faggots for the fire of destruction. And when it comes to the wheat and tares, we're told in Matthew 13:30 that the tares are bound first. This is Judas right here going down. Judas falling because Judas is Pergamos. Must be a falling away before the man of sin is revealed. Okay, so this history became a very difficult symbol to work through for a while, and we began to understand that it was the third angel. I guess that looks a little bit out of balance there. And the Lord began to open light about what this represented in the same period of time where in this movement, this first test for us, we understand is the return to the old paths. It's the understanding of the line upon line. And the second test is the shaking that would come into this history. The second test is always a visual test. And in this history, it's a requirement of those that are disciples of 9/11, that believe that this is where the anointing took place that was typified by the baptism of Christ, that it would be your responsibility to determine the difference between truth and error, because there was going to be the introduction of spiritualistic teachings in this time period, and it was designed by the Lord to drive us into personal study so we would know for ourselves what is truth. Okay, in this shaking time that we're getting ready to come out of, we're now moving into the third period of time, which is the litmus test, the binding off. And if you are the men that were with Daniel in Daniel chapter 10, when you get to this point, which is the Marah vision, you're going to flee. But if you've been typified by Daniel, you're going to be slain and go through another 3 steps. But this 3 steps is not the everlasting gospel where 2 classes are developed, separated, and then manifested. It's 3 steps of empowerment as illustrated by Daniel and several other lines of prophecy that have been opened up, such as from 9/11, you can demonstrate from 9/11 to the midnight cry, or at the bigger level from 9/11 to the Sunday law, the 40 years of wandering in the wilderness of ancient Israel. You can do that because Sister White plainly says that Jericho that comes at the end of the 40 years represents the loud cry of the third angel. So Jericho is a symbol of the Sunday law. So from 9/11 to the Sunday law, you have the 40 years of wilderness wandering. But that line is, you can illustrate in a fractal from 9/11 to the midnight cry. So you got in here, you got a wilderness. I showed you wildernesses in each of these periods. And one wilderness you can plug in here is the 40 years. And those 40 years were acknowledged or repeated by Christ in his 40 days fast. And in his 40-day fast, at the end of the 40 days, at the end of this wilderness in here, Satan comes to Christ and tests him 3 times. But this isn't the everlasting gospel. This is the litmus test. After 40 days of fasting, Christ is demonstrating that no matter what Satan would throw at him, he wasn't going to be moved. Okay, so the wildernesses contribute to this binding off period, because you can find them at the end of every wilderness, and you will find in there on several witnesses this 3 steps. Okay, and this is the third angel. This is the binding off period. And the next quote says, "There have always been, and always will be tares among the wheat, the foolish virgins with the wise." So the tares are the foolish virgins, the wheat is the wise. And the next quote, separation, it says, "Again, these parables teach that there is no probation after judgment." And when it comes to the everlasting gospel, these 3, we know on several witnesses that this John 16:8, to convict the world of sin, righteousness, and judgment. Okay, there is no probation after the judgment. That's what these parables teach. This is the litmus test when you get here in the wheat and tares for the priests. All right? And when the work of the gospel is completed, there immediately follows the separation between good and evil. And what's the next phrase say? "And the destiny of each class is forever fixed." So when these men flee at Daniel's Marah vision, or when Judas falls here, when Judas rose up from the table, he was demon-possessed, and his destiny was forever fixed. Okay, the tares are bound first. Immediately thereafter, our destiny is fixed if we're faithful, but we're going to be fixed in the right direction. Matthew 13:30 is what tells you that the tares are bound first. Okay, now in early writings 279, it says, "An angel with the writer's inkhorn by his side returned from earth and reported to Jesus that his work was done and that the saints were numbered and sealed." In here, not only do you have a binding, but you have a numbering. Okay, and we have dealt with that a little bit in the history of Christ. In the upper room, the 120, which allows you to place this history in this history, because 120 is from the first day of the first month to the first day of the 5th month. You have the disciples in the upper room with the 120, and what they're doing is they're selecting a replacement for Judas. Okay, so the Matthias is going to replace Judas, And when he does so, the number of the 12 has been made up. This is marking the conclusion of this history, but this history includes a numbering. The numbering for this history in the illustration of the disciples is 12. The numbering in this history is 70. And of course, once that numbering's done, you have the 144,000, which are numbered, but then you have the 11th hour workers, which are the great multitude in Revelation 7, which we are told no man can number. Okay, so the numbering is in this history. And in Deuteronomy 18, which we have looked at, 15 through 22, it's talking about the Lord raising up a prophet like unto Moses. And then in Acts 3, 19 through 26, which we've already looked at, I hope you remember, the work of Moses in the time of Moses that leads to the midnight cry, the times that he was dealing with Pharaoh and the plagues were coming down. Moses does his work, and it is concluded by a destroying angel going through and destroying those that do not have the seal, that do not have the blood on their doorpost. And I suggested early on, if you remember, that this is an illustration of the sealing. And in the sealing in Revelation 9, which is the same sealing as Revelation 7, there is an angel that goes through with a message, the writer's inkhorn, the wine cup, and based upon how the wise and foolish virgins of the priest time period respond to that message, they get a seal or they don't. And if they don't, when they get down here, they're going to die by the 5 destroying angels, the five wise virgins. This is what's being illustrated in this history. And of course, we've been coming to understand here that Deuteronomy 18:18 is marking the raising up of this messenger for this history. This corresponds to 1 Samuel chapter 2, when a prophet comes to Eli, says your house is going to be destroyed, and then 30 days later brings us to Mordecai, and it brings us to Samuel, who's going to repeat this message. We're seeing these very truths repeated over and over again. And what I wanted to leave you with, among other things, is that these histories, this binding off, is the preparation for this people at this time to give the message here. But this here is a fractal of 9/11 to the Sunday law. This can be the Sunday law here. This can be the midnight cry. And in the midnight cry time period, the Levites, along with the priest, are getting ready to give a message to the 11th hour workers. It's always about raising up the messengers to give the message, and the message is illustrated by the wine cup, which is the day of the Lord, right? Jeremiah's got the cup that he's taken to every nation. This is in the 4th generation, when the iniquity of the Amorites has reached its full, okay? In Mark put in place, I'm sure, others may have mentioned about it, that when we put Revelation 9 on this history, we realized that at the beginning of the history of the 6th trumpet, there was a 4-year period from 1449 to 1453 that typified the 4-year period at the end of the 6th trumpet from 1840 to 1844. And when we line that up, we've seen that this 4-year period in here was another witness to the 1 month of the 6 months. This is 6 months, is it not? And in the 5 months, there's a hiding of Elizabeth. And in these 5 months, we have the 150 years of the torment of the first woe of the Revelation 9's 5th trumpet. 5th trumpet beginning back here in 1989. That's throwing me. And when it comes to its conclusion after 150 years of the first woe, the second woe begins right here. And the 6th trumpet begins simultaneously. But we came to understand that this history has also the history within it of 1449 to 1453. And then we, not addressing all the hiccups that we've had along the way as this light has been coming to the surface here in the recent past, we understood that Jesus illustrates the end from the beginning. So with this beginning 4 years of the sixth trumpet, we would also include the ending 4 years, 1840 to 1844. But probably the primary application of 1840 to 1844 is from here. Not that you can't put 49 and 53 here. But this here is the binding off for the Levites that's typified by this binding off for the priests. Are you following that logic? Okay. So once you have that, you have to determine what is it that the history of 1449 to 1453 contributes to this binding off period. It's pretty easy, not pretty easy, but I mean it's easier, it appears to me, to recognize what is contributed to this binding off period by 1840 to 1844, because that is a glorious manifestation of the power of God. And it's pretty easy to bring these illustrations of the Marah vision and what goes on when a prophet has this experience and see that it's a manifestation of the power of God, a glorious manifestation of the power of God. But when you get into this 4-year period at the beginning of the sixth trumpet, what you have marked is the Emperor of Eastern Rome surrendering his national sovereignty to the number four sultans that existed then. And then in 1451, the strongest sultan determined that he was going to take Constantinople as a prize, and he began the war. And by 1453, he's conquered Constantinople, and he does so by blowing down the walls of Constantinople. Okay, so we suddenly see a wall here, and I'll just keep it wall. And a wall, in the spirit of prophecy, you can show, is a law, is a decree. So we began to gather witnesses from these things about the characteristics that are going on here. There's some kind of law at the midnight cry. Just from that, if you can get more witnesses, and we got plenty, and we've showed them to you. So what I'm saying is, this 4 years at the beginning of the sixth trumpet, and this 4 years is part of what upholds the number 4 in this history. Okay, and the number 3 is the third angel's message. We've looked at. Yes.
Why not the 1840, 1844 cannot be towards the end there? This is for the video.
Why can't the 1840 to the 1844 what?
Be close to the Sunday law when you put in the line of Revelation 9.
It is. Oh, but no, I don't want to go into how we used to teach it. But I will. But for the last time, at first we were understanding this 4 years is down here. Okay, but that was before we understood the church triumphant and militant and the binding off periods at the level that we do. We now understand that from here to here is the binding off for the Levites. Okay, because the binding off for the priests is different than the binding off for the Levites because of the distinction between the church militant and the church triumphant. And we have put this in the record here before. But in this history, you're dealing with the church militant. He's sorting out the wheat and tares. The separation is coming here at the third waymark of the wheat and tares. But now, this is the church triumphant. And we took time to run through some Bible and spirit of prophecy to identify that sinners don't come into church triumphant anymore. They just don't. So the process of the Levites going through their binding off history, it's not marked right down here at the conclusion, because this is the history of the church triumphant. This is the history of the church militant. He's resolving the separation of the wheat and tares. He's not resolving that with the Levites. He's saying there isn't any tares getting into my church any longer. Now, every one of those Levite wheat that are going to come in with the priest in this history, they will have to have their own individual 3-step testing process. Okay? When Islam hits, fear God. They're going to realize that the economy of the United States, and on the same point in time, the economy of planet Earth is just wiped out. Okay? Fear God. And then the second test is always visual. They're going to look at this ensign of priests that is being lifted up. They're going to see the living testimony of the priest, and if they're faithful, then they're going to go into this history. So the first Levite that goes through this 3-step testing process and comes to his third individual test, because it's progressive here, because no more tares coming into church. He responds here. This is the first. The second Levite here. Third Levite here. It's a progressive binding off period for the Levites because it's the church triumphant, whereas in the church militant, the binding off takes place right at the conclusion as the wheat and tares are being taken out of the church. This process, that should have been a 4, 5, 6. This process is the same process on how the 11th hour workers come in also. Okay, so this message is it takes some time to wrap your mind around these things when they come to the surface and test them and try them. And so we've had some hiccups along the way. In the quote on page 9 that extends 2 paragraphs into page 10 from the Spirit of Prophecy, volume 3, one of the things that we came to understand where we began to struggle, I didn't want to take time to tell you this, but I guess I have to by the logic I've developed. Before we were understanding this binding off period, we could see the 11 and 1 combination. Now that may not make sense to you, but I'm going to explain it. Mark presented to you the relationship of Elijah, the first angel's message, and Elisha. Okay, Elisha's empowered here when he strikes the Jordan River, and the Jordan means descender, okay, and where they crossed over the Jordan into the promised land is the same place where Christ was baptized. Did you know that? When they came out of Egypt into the promised land and they crossed the Jordan, it's the same place where Christ was baptized, and it's at the Jordan, which means descender, and it's right by the town of Beth-barah. Okay, and Beth-barah means the ferry boat crossing. Okay, so when Christ is being baptized at the Jordan, this is where John is saying, I must descend. There's the Jordan, and he must ascend. Okay, and it's at the point of transition, the ferry boat crossing. You're crossing from the ministry of John the Baptist to the ministry of Christ. And this has been typified. John the Baptist was Elijah and Elijah, and Elisha was typifying Christ. So when you see Elijah's ministry being handed off to Elisha, it's happening at the Jordan. And he strikes the Jordan twice, and he gets a double measure of his spirit. So that is all here. But in the story of Elijah, this is the point I'm trying to get to, when Elijah calls him, he's plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. This is the 12 disciples, and he slays one of them. Okay, he takes the yoke for the fire. He slays 2 of the oxen because a yoke is 2. But in any case, you have 11 yoke of oxen coming to here, and 1 dies here. That's typifying the 11 disciples that come to here when Judas dies, and then he's being replaced by Matthias. So originally when we were struggling with this, we could see this history and we thought Matthias to become part of the 11 disciples, we could see these markers that he must go through some kind of 3-step everlasting gospel. There must be in this history. If you remember, they chose between Matthias and Justus. And we're thinking, okay, Justus is the foolish virgin, Matthias is the wise virgins, but not so. We came to understand it's very clear in the Bible and the spirit of prophecy that Matthias and Justus were with the disciples, working with them right from the baptism. Okay, they were there the whole time. This isn't a new group of people that are coming in that are going through their own process to make up the number. This is the number that's made up of this group. Okay, but the point is that the numbering is specifically being marked because the third angel, he binds and seals and numbers and separates. All this is going on. The separation here, he's binding us. He's fixing our character for eternity. He's putting a seal upon us, and he's finishing the number. Here the number is 12, whether it's that 12th yoke of oxen or it's Matthias. Here, the numbering takes place throughout this history. Okay, because this number here is 70. And essentially the numbering here is made up, it's finished at the Sunday law, but because this is a progressive binding off, it goes to here. But there's a numbering that takes place here. That's why I pointed you to Genesis 46:27, I think, or 25 or 27, that when Jacob came down, he brought 70 with him. There's a numbering that goes on in both of those histories. And if you read this, I'm not going to, because I just told you, these 3 paragraphs of this Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 3, you will find that Matthias was one of the disciples, and he was not someone that needed to go through a 3-step testing process. He was just making up the numbering. Okay, in Luke 1, we've seen Elizabeth hiding for 5 months, and that's the 5 months of Revelation 9. And in Esther, it's not popping into my mind. I got the verses I could go look. I don't want to go look because of time. What I want to tell you is that right here, you will see a bowing down. Okay, in 1 Samuel 25, when David sends 10 men, this is an answer for the question about those 2 tens here. He sends them to Nabal, and Nabal rejects their request. David, get this, it seems maybe at first glance a little bit of sacrilegious, but it's exactly what the Bible says, and it's a perfect illustration. When these 10 men get rebuked by Nabal, who's living at Carmel, and when we first started teaching this, I don't know how many months ago, there's a sister in this room that lives out in California, in Northern California, up in the mountains, but I don't want to say who she is because she doesn't like me to. She challenged us saying the Carmel in 1 Samuel 25 is not Mount Carmel of Elijah. And we were identifying it as such. She says it's a town. There's both a Mount Carmel and a town, and they're in 2 different places. And sure enough, in 1 Samuel 25, Nabal's living in the town of Carmel. Okay, but it didn't matter. We had all the prophetic witnesses to put it there anyway. But what we realized is that you got 2 Carmels here, which is where the doubling is. And the one is a mountain, which is a church, and the other is a city, which is a state. So you've got the 2 Carmels marking the image of the beast testing right here. So it wasn't a problem, but Nabal's living in Carmel. So he's living at the midnight cry. He rejects these 10 men's requests for support. So David's coming from Paran, which is Arabia. He's coming from 9/11, from Islam. And he's coming to kill every one of Nabal's men that piss against the wall. And it says it more than once. What are they doing here? They're pissing against the wall. All right? The wall is the subject here. The wall, this law, whatever this law is, being desecrated in this story. And by the time it's all said and done, Abigail comes out to meet David. And she meets him at the covert, okay? And the covert is a hiding, okay? She meets him right here where the hiding ends, okay? So she meets him here, and she bows down to him. You'll see a bowing right at this waymark on several levels. And then, of course, Nabal, who's been having a drunken feast right here, like other illustrations of a drunken feast in this history, he gets so drunk that evidently he has a stroke, but he doesn't die until 10 days later. Okay, so these are the kind of symbols that begin to build our understanding of this binding off period, and they're profound, and they're profound. They're just not human. Anyone thinks it's human. Anyway, Mark dealt with 508 to 538. In Ezekiel 8, in the fourth abomination, do I have Amos listed there? Yes. Let me show you something that I don't think has been mentioned yet. In this history, this number 4, it can be placed in this history for a number of reasons. But in this fourth generation, in the testing of the fourth generation of Adventism, we will be confronted with each of the sins that our fathers, our spiritual forefathers in the Adventist church, have accomplished in each generation. This is about the fourth generation. So although this is the third message, there is also the 4 generational test, I'll call it that go on in this history. 1, 2, 3, 4. And what you have to see to really get this one is that there is, when it comes to 3 and 4, and I already said this at a different level, they're connected. Okay, the third church is Pergamos. The fourth church is Thyatira. If you don't have Pergamos, you never have a Thyatira. Okay, because Pergamos is the church that falls away, according to Paul in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, in order that Thyatira, the man of sin in that history, can be revealed. Okay, so you can't separate 3 and 4. And this history here is judgment. You follow me? At this level, sin, righteousness, and judgment. Okay? But at the level of 4 generations, this is the third generation and the fourth generation. And I'm saying you got to relate to them as one unit of thought, cause and effect. So go with me, if you would, to Amos. We won't spend a lot of time in Amos. I'm just going to point to something you've seen before, but now it might make a little more sense to you. In verse 3, chapter 1, thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Damascus and for 4. You notice he's tying these third and fourth sins together? Look at verse 6. For 3 transgressions of Gaza and for 4. Look at 9. For 3 transgressions of Tyrus and 4. Look at 11, 13, chapter 2, 1, 4, and 6. It's in your notes. You're going to see for 3 transgressions, the transgression of the third generation, and for the transgression of the fourth generation, judgment's going to be executed. Okay, so the third and fourth are connected together. So like in Ezekiel 8, as an example, the third abomination, this weeping for Tammuz, is the false latter rain on lots of witnesses, but in the terminology of Pergamos and Thyatira, because in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, the primary application that Paul is making initially in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, if we don't extend it down here to the end of the world, what Paul's talking about is the church of Pergamos, symbolized by Constantine, where the Christian church is going to fall away as there's a mixing, a mingling between idolatry and Christianity. And in that third church of Pergamos, it leads to Thyatira. This is where Judas falls away in order for Barabbas to be, man of sin to be revealed, for Barabbas to be revealed at the cross. This is a cross here. So the third, fourth, what I want you to see in Ezekiel chapter 8, when you get to for 3 transgressions and for 4, when you get to the third transgression of the weeping for Tammuz, you're also right there at the fourth transgression of bowing down to the sun. There's the bowing of Abigail and others, yes? And the men that are bowing are 25. So suddenly you begin to see the number 25 is plugged into this history.
25 in 1901 at the General Conference, 25 was the number of
Yeah.
delegates.
Yes, I make that point from time to time. If they were, if, I'll explain it. In 1901, okay, the General Conference did something that if I cared about that circumstance, if I wanted to try to change God's prophetic providence, which I wouldn't do, but just to make my point, if I was the General Conference president for a day, the first thing I would do is I'd either take one man off the General Conference Committee or add one. Because in 1901, they sent up the General Conference Committee and they put 25 men up on it, and it's the same to this very day. And in Ezekiel 8, there are 25 men right here that are bowing down to the sun. Now, brothers and sisters, this is not humorous, because chapter 8 and chapter 9 are repeating and enlarging. And when this is going on in Adventism, those people that receive the seal of God, they're not laughing about this. They're sighing and crying about this. This is a tragedy. And I'm not trying to rebuke anybody. I just want you to focus in. This is a fact, okay? But I'm not even dealing with that. I'm dealing with the number 25 coming into this history. So now, in this binding off history, we're getting the number 25, the number 4, the number 3 are getting plugged in here to build, and the number 4, I said that, to build the evidence of what this represents. And this is why, when we get to here, we see the 25 is the age of the Levites. And they could serve until they were 50. And 50 is Pentecost. It's the Sunday law. Now, don't misunderstand. It takes twice as much time if I'm going to show you both lines. I'm not going to show you both lines. I'm going to let you think it through. This is the fractal of this, okay? Therefore, if we're going to look at this, this means this is the midnight cry and this is the Sunday law at the big level. So from right here at the big level, okay, this is where Judas at the big level, at the midnight cry, he falls away. And this is where the 25 men bow down to the sun so they can receive the mark of the beast here at the big level. You follow me? But we're looking at the fractal. Now, I don't know. I'm open for more light from the Lord. I know there's a series of Sunday laws that leads to this Sunday law. And I'm kind of suspicious that this law, this decree that gets passed here, even though I'm pretty certain it's going to be about marriage, it may very well have a Sunday component in it. And that would even contribute to this 25 bowing down the sun. But even if that's not the case, what it's saying, irregardless of that, is that these men, they have developed the character for the mark of the beast. If they get here, they're going to get the mark of the beast. They've already settled that character decision back here. All right. So 25 becomes a component of that history. The Levites, I'm on page 11 now. There is 25 years from the Lisbon, Portugal earthquake to the dark day. All right. Now, both of those are signs that are marked in God's word. So you have the right, as a student of prophecy, to put in this history that right here, there's going to be an earthquake. And don't doubt that you got second witnesses to this, but you do. You do. And this is a dark day. But you're also going to see other witnesses for earthquakes and dark days. But we already showed you one. One is the French Revolution. When you get down here, there's a period when the two witnesses are finishing their testimony and they're slain. They're slain for 3.5 days in the street. And at the end of the 3.5 days, they're resurrected right here where Lazarus is resurrected, or at the big level right over here. Okay, what's taking place in that history is the earthquake where a 10th part of the city fell, and the 10th part of the city that falls here at this earthquake, binding off period, is the United States. Okay, in the time of France, it was 1/10 of former pagan Rome. In our history, the United States is the sixth kingdom of Bible prophecy. It's the king of the 10 kings. The sixth kingdom falls from this earthquake at the Sunday law. And all of this fits. I'm just telling you about the lines of prophecy that have been building this, and you can see some references for earthquakes, dark days. Was there any dark days or earthquakes at the cross? They plug in, brothers and sisters, they plug in. I'm just giving you an overview. I'm not trying to give you everything that we found. One that's interesting to me, that from 1818 to 1843, William Miller's message was, he came to his understanding in 1818, and he's predicting 1843. And if you haven't looked closely at the Daniel 12, go to Daniel 12 just so you get the logic of this. In verse 12, when did 1843 end? April 18th, 1844? Okay. If there's a way to mark where April 18th, 1843 ends and April 19th begins, is there a way to mark that? Now, forget that. No, I mean, I don't want to go into that. I mean, in theory, this is about time. How much actual time does it take to change from the 18th to the 19th? No one knows. Okay, but how about this? April 18 touches April 19th, does it not? Okay, there isn't any break, because if it was a break, it would be a break in time. Okay, so notice verse 12. It says, "Blessed is he who waiteth and cometh to the 1,335 days." That word cometh means toucheth. Okay, so William Miller, this prophecy, it touches 1844. But William Miller, this prediction of William Miller is marking 25 years until you get to 1844. And what happens in 1844? Well, you've got 1844 already up here. 1843 touches it. This 25 years. What happens in 1818? Miller has been prepared with a message, okay, that takes you to this point here. All right, so these 25s, this is 25 years, it fits in there like apostasy. Apostasy in 1863. And 25 years later, you're at the latter rain in 1888. Okay, so you can plug in 1863 to 1888 in that 25 years. And remember, when I'm doing that here at the little level, these symbols will also plug in here to here, because this binding off period is simply the bigger looking binding off period for the Levites than the smaller looking binding off period for the priests. Okay, so we mentioned that in the Millerite history, this is where I wanted to go. This is why I've kind of been racing. We've mentioned that in the Millerite history, October 22nd, 1844, here, Sunday law, from the first disappointment here, first day of the first month, April 19th, if you go to the dead center, you're at July 21st, and the Millerites understood this. They understood, based upon the time prophecy of the 2300 evenings and mornings, because that's how the Hebrews expressed in Daniel 8:14, that this is the parable of the 10 virgins, and it's dealing with the dark part of the day. And the day is divided up into morning and night. So when they plug that history in, the dead center of this history is July 21st, and they called it midnight. July 21st, 7/21/44. And here's the midnight cry, which is 8/15/44. And it's 25 days apart. Okay, and this is also Ezekiel 1, it's Marah vision. And what is it, the 5th day of the 4th month? In the Karaite reckoning of that history, the 5th day of the 4th month fell on July 21st, 1844, because this is where Ezekiel's getting the Marah vision. And when Ezekiel gets that Marah vision on the 5th day of the 4th month, what year is it? It's the 30th year. Go to verse 1 of Ezekiel 1. Now it came to pass in the 30th year. Okay, so you got the number 30 marked there as well, which is something that is repeatedly coming up. This is the 6th of the 6th months. Anyway, Ezekiel receives the Marah vision at that point in time. And now let's consider the number 38, because we were throwing the number 38 around here, and it's came to my attention that very few of us have understood the number 38 as a prophetic symbol. There are 4 places in the Bible where the number 38 is mentioned, and what we're understanding is that the number 38 in the Millerite history is representing 1838, when Josiah Litch set forth a prediction about the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1840. And if you really get detailed about his prediction, he made the prediction that in 1840 it's going to come down, and then 10 days before, on August 1st, 1840, he fine-tuned and republished his prediction, and he didn't just predict 1840, he predicted August 11th, 1840. So we are understanding that this history of Josiah Litch, his prediction in 1838, then there's 10 days from August 1st, 1840 to August 11th, 1840, is emphasizing the rules of prophetic interpretation. Okay, so let me tell you why we're placing it that way. In the center of page 12, and you can see a diagram of what I just put down there at the bottom of page 12. But you all know this. This is Sister White's comment on Josiah Litch from the Great Controversy 334, 335. And I'm just going to take like the last 2/3 of the second paragraph to make my point. It says the event, the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, the event exactly fulfilled the prediction. When it became known, multitudes were convinced of the correctness of the principles of prophetic interpretation adopted by Miller and his associates, and a wonderful impetus was given to the Advent movement. So what I'm saying is the second test in our history where these brethren left the path that we were on, when you realized what they were teaching about the book of Joel, that one of their leading personalities had derived, didn't discover that understanding from his personal Bible study. He discovered it by his own testimony from some old Protestant commentaries. There were Protestants of the old that were teaching these things about Joel that we were saying, no, okay. There was an argument in this history about methodology. They had those brethren have no problem saying that the theologians of the Seventh-day Adventist Church are not sound in their biblical application, but they didn't have a problem reaching out to the same fouled water of methodology that those theologians of Adventism were using, and they began to come up with those same fouled understandings of what the passages meant. And when they were addressed about that, they had no willingness to set aside those doctrines of Moab, okay? So in this history, we've had an argument, whether you understand it or not, over methodology. And as the argument of methodology proceeded, the ministry we're in kept saying, don't care about whether you or I are no good nicks. What we're dealing with is a subject in the Bible. Prove your point from the Bible that what you're teaching is true. And they reverted to some, yeah, you're mean, okay? They reverted to some just personality attacks, and that isn't my point. I'm not belly aching. I'm trying to let you know, if you haven't seen it, there has been an argument in those that profess to be disciples of 9/11 over methodology, okay? And that's what Josiah Litch is symbolizing here. There's been an argument over methodology, but when Josiah Litch's prediction, this is his prediction, because one of these histories is 1840 to 44. So there's going to be a prediction, right, that's going to be fulfilled right here. And when it comes to pass, multitudes will be convicted of the correctness of the prophetic principles adopted by this message. And the only reason they're going to be convicted is because there has been an argument about it, okay? For instance, there's one real famous guy in this movement that is making a prediction that in 3 days, the probation for Seventh-day Adventists closes when the Pope goes and visits the Congress. That's definitely a footstep on the way to the Sunday law. But that is not the midnight cry message, though he claims that it is. And it is not where probation closes for Seventh-day Adventists on a multitude of reasons, okay? So in this history, we're experiencing this argument over methodology, and the Lord is going to confirm the methodology once again, because this is the history of Elijah at Mount Carmel. And Elijah at Mount Carmel is being demonstrated to be the true prophet, as opposed to the prophets of Baal and the priest of the grove. It's part of the confirmation of the correct prophetic interpretation is part of this story. And it's part of confirming who the messengers are, because the messengers are going to be lifted up, as was Litch. When Litch came out in 1838 with his prediction, everybody thought he was an idiot, okay? But on August 11th, multitudes were convicted that the methodology that Miller and Litch were using was correct. So we're seeing this history because we believe, like some used to believe and no longer believe, we still believe that the Millerite history is repeated to the very letter. Therefore, Litch is one of the lines that we're plugging in here. That before you get here, before you make this prediction, the methodology is part of the story. Okay, so I'm going to come back, Lord willing, to the top of this page, but flip over. I want to add another line. This midnight to the midnight cry. This is there may be others, but this is the waymarks of the development of the message of the midnight cry by Samuel Snow. Okay, Miller writes an article on May 17th, 1843, that Samuel Snow ultimately is going to use to begin his work in developing the midnight cry message. Then Samuel Snow writes a letter on February 16th, 1844, where he puts the basics of his understanding of the midnight cry message in a letter that ends up printed in one of the Millerite publications on April 3rd, 1844. Then at the Boston Tabernacle on July 21st, 1844, he presents the message of the midnight cry for the first time, and 25 days later in Exeter, he presents it a second time, Exeter, and this is where it's empowered. Now, in the quote in the center of page 13 from the Great Controversy, and I'm not going to take the time, but you will find that the pioneers understood that July 21st was midnight for that history, okay? And they understood the distinction between midnight and the midnight cry, but Sister White does too. If you read it, if you can see it, you'll see it. It says this: while the bridegroom tarried. When did the bridegroom tarry in the Millerite history? April 19th. While the bridegroom tarried, they all slumbered and slept, and at midnight there was a cry made, Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go you out to meet him. Then all the virgins arose and trimmed their lamps. In the summer of 1844, midway between the time when it had first thought that the 2300 days would end, that would be April 19th, 1844, and the autumn of the same year to which they afterwards found it extended, that would be October 22nd, 1840. That'd be October 22nd, 1844, right? To which it was afterward found they extended, the message was proclaimed in the very words of Scripture. So what I'm saying is, there is a distinction between midnight and the midnight cry. And that's why, whether you remember it or not, I made a point that the first midnight cry was in Egypt. There was a cry at midnight. Are you wanting to tell me something?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have a quote for you that helps to distinguish this midnight from the midnight.
A pioneer quote?
Sister White.
All right. Which one? This is a big page. The top one. You don't realize what I'm doing. I'm racing. I'm passing over quotes. Okay. Michael wants you to, when you test out what I'm saying, look at early writings, page 239. Very good quote. All right, very good quote. But I know I got 10 minutes and I'm not even to the punchline. So I've already cut some of my quotes out. I'm not going to add his in, all right? Early writings, what is it?
It's just saying.
No, don't define it. 239. Okay, so here on the bottom of what I want you to see in the bold face towards the bottom of this page, Lich is a symbol of 1840. Snow is a symbol of 1844. Lich is about the prediction and the methodology, and snow is about the outpouring of the Spirit in the closed door. Okay? Have you ever hear about in the olden days when they used to use leeches to suck people's blood out? I wonder how many people died from having their blood sucked out by leeches. All right? But the Old English word for a doctor that used leeches was lich. The meaning of lich is to be secured or attached, because that's what a leech does, okay? So the methodology that Lich used was the methodology of Miller, which, brothers and sisters, this here is the foundations of Adventism, okay? This chart. This is the foundation and the pillars, but I'll just deal with this chart to make my point. The foundation of this foundation is William Miller's rules. If you don't have William Miller's rules, you don't come to these conclusions, okay? So the foundation of the foundation is the methodology. Lich is being used to confirm the very foundation, the methodology, and his name, Josiah, his first name is Josiah, which is the foundation. His last name is Lich, which means secured. When you get to the fulfillment on August 11th, 1840, multitudes were convinced of the correctness of prophetic interpretation adopted by Miller and Associates. The foundations were secured by Josiah Lich. Okay? So that's 1840. But Samuel Snow is 1844. Samuel Snow is predicting the third angel, the binding off. That's his message. He predicts October 22nd, 1844, when the third angel's message arrives. That is the midnight cry. The midnight cry is about the third angel, and this binding off period is the third angel. This is the midnight cry. So Samuel Snow, the word Samuel means hearing. Sheffield, his middle name, means a field of sheaves, like you're bringing in the sheaves, all right? And snow is white linen, okay? Samuel Snow, in his message of the midnight cry, is a manifestation of righteousness, of white linen, okay? Because they're bringing in the sheaves, because they've heard the message. Okay, so their names correspond to the work that they did. I know that bothers some people, but it don't bother me. So if you back up to the next page, I'm going to try to show you why the number 38 is a symbol, okay? And one of the things the number 38 is going to identify for us is that when you get to 38, there is a rising up. And there's other witnesses to the rising up. In this history, the priests are going to begin to be lifted up. They're going to be the ensign for the Levites. And when you get to the Sunday law, the first fruits of Levites and priests are going to be lifted up. They're going to rise up as the ensign for the 11th hour workers. So as the messengers and the messages are getting prepared right here, you see noted a lifting up, okay? Right when Judas is going down, right? Okay, so, I picked that up. I never used to say that. Finish my sentence with the word right. It's okay. I heard you in me, my brother. Okay, so go to Deuteronomy 2, verses 13. Deuteronomy 2, because the number 38 you're only going to find 4 times in the scriptures. Right? Deuteronomy 2, there's nothing wrong with picking up something from what you're around, but in Wales, I did something that just blew my mind when I did it. I always wonder, the English, I always kind of submit to the Englishmen when it comes to the English language, all right? I like the American language a little bit better, but I admit, they're the original, so don't argue too hard against it. But I've never figured out why they pronounce Isaiah like they do. I just don't see any grammatical justification for it. They're always, how do you say it? Isaiah, okay? It's, the way I read it is, I can't spell Isaiah. Isaiah. Isaiah is the only way I can do it, okay? But they do Isaiah, and in Wales, I said, go to Isaiah so-and-so. And I said, whoa, where did I pick that up from? I suppose as long as I don't do controversy, is that how we do it? Okay. Deuteronomy 2, verses 13 to 25 is the first mention of 38 in the scriptures. And it says, now rise up. Okay, notice the rise up. Said I, and get you over the brook Zered. And we went over the brook Zered, and the space in which we came from Kadesh Barnea until we were come over the brook Zered is 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war wasted out from among the host, as the Lord sware unto them. And how far did I want me to go? To verse 25. Verse 24, drop down to verse 24. It's continuing on this theme. He says, rise ye up, take your journey, and pass over the river Arnon. And verse 25, it says, this day will I begin to put the dread of thee and the fear of thee upon the nations under the whole heaven. Okay? So when you're rising up here, this is consistent with the awakening of the heathens and the fear of what takes place as the United States is struck, and the heathen, all the nations of the world are getting drawn into this, because this 38, this dynamic here, is getting plugged into this history, because this is where our prediction is taking place, and we're getting lifted up. And I'm saying the number 38 is one of the symbols, but what you need to understand about this number 38, it's taking place in the 40 years, which you can put witness after witness of 40 years in this history, but it's the last 38 years. Initially, when I was just looking at 38, I thought it was the first 38 years, and then you got 2 years to here, but it's not. This is the last 38 years, so when you get to the 38th year, you're at the 40th year. That's why if you notice at one level, Mark had 38 and 40 right together on his board. Okay, so what happens at the 38th, 40th year is that all the rebels are dead. Okay, they've all died, and you're getting lifted up because you're at a river. How many rivers do we see here? It's time to cross over the river. Why? Because you're going to go battle with the nations of the world. Okay, so 38 has to do with rising up, has to do with methodology. The second one I want you to look up is the one that Brother Daniel read today in the anointing service. And that just kind of blew my mind, that when it was all said and done, there was 38 people that got anointed today. And it was that was noticed after the fact. It wasn't a plan. If we didn't cut it off at 38 to make this point, all right? In groups of 12, but whoever was, were you counting the 12s, my brother? Yes. Verse 5, or chapter 5 of John, and after verse 1, and after this was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is at Jerusalem a sheep market, by the sheep market a pool, which is called in the Hebrew tongue Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of impotent folk, of blind, halt, withered, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain season into the pool and troubled the water. Whoever then first after the troubling of the water stepped in was made whole of whatsoever disease he had. And a certain man was there which had an infirmity of 38 years. When Jesus saw him lie and knew that he had been now a long time in that case, he said, Wilt thou be made whole? And the impotent man answered, Sir, I have no man when the water is troubled to put me in the pool. But while I am coming, another steppeth down before me. Jesus said, Rise up, take up thy bed, and walk. The number 38, it's about a lifting up. There are all kinds of wonderful little prophetic symbols that can be addressed in those verses that I just read. I'm only dealing with 38 because of time. Now there is another 38 that I want you to see, 2 more, as we're bringing this to a close. Go to 1 Kings 16, verse 29 through 34. 1 Kings, top of page 12. 1 Kings 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 29. You there? And in the 38th year of Asa. Now, Asa, brothers and sisters, Asa, he's the king of Judah, right? And he reigned during the time when 7 kings of the northern kingdom reigned. Okay? Who do you suppose the first king that was reigning in the north when Asa was reigning in the south was? His name was Jeroboam the first. And the 7th king, the last king that was reigning in the north when Asa was reigning, what do you suppose his name was? Ahab. Okay, so when you consider the prophetic implication of that revelation of the 7 thunders, okay, where does it take you? Well, you got Jeroboam right here, right, for one thing, but you've got the story of Carmel with Ahab and Jezebel in here. This 7 thunders is definitely another 7 thunders because it's taking you right to the time period where the prophets of Baal are being distinguished from the true prophet Elijah, and it's doing so in the 38th year of Asa. Verse 29 says, And in the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, began Ahab, the son of Omri, to reign over Israel. And Ahab, the son of Omri, reigned over Israel in Samaria 22 years. And Ahab, the son of Omri, did evil in the sight of the Lord above all that were before him. And it came to pass, as if had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, that he took the wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. And he reared up an altar for Baal in the house of Baal. There's a lifting up going on in this time period, which he had built in Samaria. And Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him. In his days did Hiel the Bethlehemite build Jericho. He laid the foundation thereof in Abiram his firstborn, and set up the gates thereof in his youngest son Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Joshua the son of Nun. And I know that I don't have it all, because this was just sent to me not so long ago. I haven't wrapped my mind around it, but I have a summary. Asa means physician. He is the king of Judah. He reigned during these 7 northern kingdoms. It's from Jeroboam to Ahab. And this is the days of one king, is it not? Okay. So why is it the days of one king? Because it's the 7 thunders. And I don't know who walked you through the 7 thunders, but the days of one king is Isaiah 23, that the Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years as the days of one king. And anyway, this is too big. We can't plug that in right now. And this 7 thunders corresponds to that. And Asa sets up an image of the beast Ahab sets up an image of the beast by marrying Jezebel. Jericho's foundations and gates are built. So we're getting to this 38th year of Asa is placing us right here. And it's bringing us down to Ahab, where he's marrying Jezebel, which is the image of the beast. And also in this time period, the foundations. Now, in this time period, the foundations for Jerusalem are being built. But here, the foundations of Jericho are being built, because this is Jericho here at the Sunday law. Okay, Jericho's being built. I was mentioning that before. You got 2 lines of prophecy going through. You got Jerusalem being built. You got Jericho being built. You got the offering of the first fruits lifted up as an ensign, and you got the image to the beast lifted up to the papacy. Okay, there's 2 themes that are going on at the Sunday law, and Jericho's getting built in this time period. And right here, 38th, 40th year is marking this history where all this comes in. One more, and we'll close out on that. And it's 2 Kings 15, 8 through 12. In the 38th year of Azariah, king of Judah, did Zechariah, the son of Jeroboam, reign over Israel in Samaria 6 months. 2 Kings 15:8. 9th, verse 9. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, as his fathers had done. He departed not from his sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. And Shalom, the son of Jabesh, conspired against him and smote him before the people and slew him and reigned in his stead. And the rest of the acts of Zechariah, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel. This was the word of the Lord which he spake unto Jehu, saying, Thy son shall sit on the throne of Israel unto the 4th generation. And so it came to pass. So the death of Azariah, of Zechariah, okay, is the fulfillment of Jehu's prophecy of he would have a descendant to the 4th generation. So this is placing this history in the 4th generation, which is this history. And Azariah in the 38th year is being placed right here. Let me look at my summary. Azariah means to surround and protect, 4th generation after Jehu. You can look at that prophecy in 2 Kings 10:30. And there is a conspiracy against the king of the 10 nations that ends with his death. Judgment in the 4th generation against the land of the 6th kingdom, a Bible prophecy. His death of the 4th generation, Zechariah, is marked here because this is the remembering, and he dies here. Thus the United States falls here in the 4th generation, and it's taking place with this number 38, which for us is this binding off period, but for the Levites is this binding off period. It's the 38th, 40. It's about the message that gets proclaimed at this time. And there's a lot more to say, but we're going to end right there. Let me think for 1 second, though, to make sure that I've put everything in the record that we need to put in the record. All right, I didn't put everything in the record that we need to put in the record, but I do want to summarize what I've said. I'm sure I'm over time again. Brothers and sisters, the reform lines just went to another level. Okay? The most holy place has been opened up. Okay? The books of Daniel and Revelation have been opened up where they are now present truth, without challenging any correct pioneer understanding of Daniel and Revelation. We now see Daniel and Revelation pretty much fully opened. Not understood because we haven't had time to wrap our minds around these truths, but we can see Daniel 1 to 12 as present truth. Revelation 1 to the end is present truth. The Lion of the tribe of Judah has unsealed his prophetic message. He's put together the components pretty much of what our prediction will be. It appears there may be just a couple more things he's going to put in place that just puts everything in place. We have ideas about something for a while, and then overnight almost, he inserts just one other line and it changes a few things, but those few things that are kind of frustrating that you have to change because you've taught them differently, they're well worth changing because it spreads light on all kinds of other things you never recognized before. That's been going on. Not that it's the first pope, but a pope just arrived here in the United States today or yesterday, whatever it is. He's in Cuba, in the Western Hemisphere. He's heading for the Congress. He's heading for the United Nations. The economy is about as, it's not even unstable. It's just, it's a false presentation of what the economy is. It's only being held up because we have not fulfilled our responsibility to bring our character into agreement with the message of the times. And the message that seems to be coming into place is being attacked at several levels, which doesn't prove anything. Jehovah's Witnesses can argue that's a proof of the truth because they get attacked. But nevertheless, the true message and messengers will be attacked at the end of the world during the latter rain time period. That's happening. There are famines in the world. There are wars in the world. In Chile, there was an earthquake this week where they had tsunami warnings from Hawaii to all the west coast of the United States. I think it was 8.3. We got volcanoes. We got diseases. We've got all kinds of unnatural phenomena taking place in nature. We have every external evidence you want to look at that we've been pointed to by the spirit of prophecy in the Bible to confirm that we are here. We have the history of the Millerites that is telling us that the midnight cry message that they proclaimed in their history is to be repeated in our history, and that the summary of their message was a message about the third angel's message. And we're now understanding that this special little period here, this binding off, is the third angel's message. So, brothers and sisters, I would submit to you that we are about this close to be coming out of the hiding, out of the 5 months. At which point you have either brought your faith up to the level to where you can go ahead and stay engaged with Christ when He appears with you and fall down as one dead and let Him raise you up and prepare you to give this message of the midnight cry, or you turn and flee. And brothers and sisters, what a tragedy to understand what we're understanding and get to that point and be among those that turn and flee. All right, so I would ask if there are any of us in here that would like to, in agreement with the message we've heard for this week, stand up and make a commitment to the Lord that you and I are going to do whatever it takes in our own experience to get ready for this coming crisis, that the Lord would honor our token of entering into an agreement, a covenant with Him over this issue by acknowledging that we have just stood up to say that we want to be Samuel. We want to be Daniel. We want to be Ezekiel. We want to be part of those that carry this message to a dying world.
Amen.
So you want to sing, my sister, before or after? Okay, after. So we've made that commitment. We spent a week together. Let's bow together and seal that commitment with a prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the light that you have shed upon us this week, that you've been shedding upon us for several years now, but the light that's coming out of your word now is beyond anything that we have imagined, and it appears that you have more for us. But as we see what's ahead of us in this binding off period, we feel unworthy. We feel unable to see ourselves actually experiencing that binding off period. So I ask that you would strengthen our faith to see that it was you that called us here. You knew we would be in this little church in Bismarck millions of years ago, and that you have a plan for each of us, and you're willing to accomplish that plan. And it was so important for you to accomplish that plan for each one of us that you gave your only Son to die and shed His blood, that we might be among those represented by the prophets during the binding off period. We have family members, parents, cousins, aunts, uncles, and especially children and grandchildren that don't have the conviction to be studying these things or that are fighting these things, and we ask that you give us the word in due season to awaken them, or that you would send someone else to awaken them, to arouse them to the need of immediate preparation. We know that our time is short. We have a work that we've taken up for you that is now branching out around planet Earth, and we ask that those that are working in these areas, that you would bless them and watch over them and let them be powerful instruments in their own sphere of influence. We ask as we break camp here this evening and start heading our different directions, that you would give us traveling mercies to wherever we're going, and that you would give us the opportunity when we return home to spend some time with you in prayer and some time with you in testing the things that we've heard, and then some more time with you in prayer, that you might seal these truths into our minds, and that you might bring us up to the point to where we can be among those that receive the seal and the number and are bound off at midnight to the midnight cry. We thank you for the fellowship that we've had here, the spirit that we've had here, and we don't know if we'll ever, as this group, meet again until we have the possibility of meeting on the Sea of Glass, and we ask that you would make that happen, that everyone in this room would be there on the Sea of Glass on our way to heaven and thereafter to the earth made new. And we thank you for this possibility. In Jesus' name, amen.